expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Jan Crawford, joined, of course, by Bob Schieffer. In just a little bit, the president is going to outline his plans for how to reduce the deficit. We're going to talk about that now first with Chip Reid, our White House correspondent at the White House. Chip, thanks for joining us. We're just a few minutes away. I guess, first of all, what do you know as far as whether or not the president is actually going to offer some specifics in this speech? House Republicans, of course, have outlined some pretty detailed plans for how they would do it. What do we expect to get from President Obama today?
Well, I'll tell you, Jan, I think one word tells it all. You said the president is going to reveal his plan. You have to pull teeth to get them to use the word plan. Jay Carney used it once yesterday, but only because we kept insisting that, kept asking, isn't it a plan? The word they like is vision. This is a vision. This is some big, grand, philosophical thing. I don't think we're going to get the kind of details a lot of people are crying out for. I think the president is going to dig deeper into the numbers. Up on the Hill, people who have been briefed by the president are already saying it's going to be $4 billion over 12 years or less. But
well, let me interrupt you there. Right now,
$4
trillion over 12 years. That's a lot more than what he laid out in February.
It's a do-over.
Why?
Well, it's a do-over. They realized that was just not enough to get the ball rolling, so they're going again. But, you know, that was really just a placeholder, what he did in February. He knew people weren't going to take it very seriously, and they were just waiting with bated breath for Paul Ryan to put his plan out there, which they knew everybody was going to label the Republican plan, even though a lot of Republicans are very nervous about it. And it's very easy to for them to set that up as a boogeyman now. So the president is not only going to lay out his vision today, he's going to go after that Paul Ryan plan in a big way. And what the president wants to do eventually is kind of own the middle, or at least the middle left. He knows that the liberal groups are not going to go for this. They've already threatened to stop contributing to him if he cuts Medicare and Medicaid. And he knows he's not going to get the conservative Republicans, but he wants to get that broad middle. They're already thinking re-election with this plan, Jan.
All right. Well, let me bring in Bob here, because obviously $4 trillion, as Chip is just reporting from his sources on the Hill, might be in this plan. It was $1 trillion in February. I think the Ryan plan, which really is a plan, I mean, it's got some details in it, is about $6.2 trillion. All right, a lot of numbers, a lot of changing numbers. What does all this mean? Why has Obama gone to now this vision of $4 trillion? Is this Republicans forcing his hand? Obviously, just a week ago, we had that.
Sure.
More numbers here, $39 billion. Is that right? Cuts in spending?
Well, I wouldn't say that the Republicans have forced his hand, but the president knows he's got to do something. He's trying to get back the independent voters that
the middle,
put
like
him
Chip
in
is.
He lost those during this recent election. I mean, they just vanished, and he's got to find some way to do this. This is what Bill Clinton called triangulation, the third way. He wants to set himself up in the middle. Now, over at the White House, if you mention the word triangulation, they go, "Oh my God!"
What about if you mention the word Clinton?
Well,
Bill.
Yeah, exactly. But that's basically what they're trying to do here, and he's not going to give out too many details here because he wants to negotiate that, and both sides know they've got to negotiate it. But let me tell you something, Jan. You know this agreement that they all agreed to last year to fund the government for the rest of this year? I'm still not certain that's going to pass. That was agreed to by the leadership. I think it's going to pass, but this is going to be very, very close. And that just shows
we're talking about the major
how
compromise.
Dicey all of this is here because, you've got Democrats up in New York out demonstrating in the streets about the social cuts. You've got the Republicans talking about, we're not cutting enough in any of this. They've got to pass that first before they get to what the president's talking about, and that is this long-range plan. They're going to have to do something that'll satisfy the Republicans, or they're not going to vote to raise the debt limit, and that's the most important thing of all.
But let me make sure I'm understanding straight. So we're talking right now the $39 billion spending cuts they agreed to after all this, 11th hour, pushing it to midnight to avert the shutdown. You're hearing that's what may not fly. Now,
I'm telling you that is still in doubt.
And
I think it's going to pass, But it is not a done deal at this point because both sides have got to vote on this. The entire House and the entire Senate have got to vote on this, and they've got to come together on an agreement. It may not pass. If it doesn't, it just throws all this other stuff out the window. I think it's going to, but don't take it for granted that that's going to pass. There's still work to be done on both sides on that.
Now, Chip, Bob and I are talking about, obviously, something that you've covered in great detail, the deal on cutting spending, averting that government shutdown. Your sources, are you hearing that this may be in jeopardy? And with the White House, is there, if House Republicans refuse to embrace this deal at the end of the day, is this something that the White House might actually not mind too much? I mean, with the politics of that spending deal going up in flames, favor Barack Obama at this point?
No, I think they really would like for it to pass, but Bob is absolutely right. There is a lot of nervousness about it right now, especially on the Republican side, because John Boehner would love to be able to pass this with Republican votes. It doesn't look like he's going to be able to. He's going to have to get some Democratic votes here, and to some degree his party's going to be split here. So it's a very uncomfortable situation, and I think the White House is probably enjoying watching him squirm a little bit, but at the end of the day, they would like it to pass. They don't want to go through this again. They want to move on to the next step.
One thing that Bob was also talking about is, and you alluded to some of the reporting you're doing with your sources about kind of going to the middle in some of this vision or plan, proposal that we're going to hear in a little bit, trying to capture some of those independent voters. Where do you see, in terms of you hearing anything about specifics in this speech where he may be able to do that, distancing himself from some of those Republican ideas that include, Medicare, Medicaid, a lot of tax cuts, that kind of thing?
Well, here's what he's going to do. The Ryan plan relies primarily on cuts to Medicare, really transformation of Medicare and Medicaid, saving money in that way. What the president is going to do is what Jay Carney and others here keep calling a balanced approach. It's not going to be just column A and column B, Medicare and Medicaid. He's also going to hit defense spending. He's also going to call for increasing taxes, as he has done repeatedly, on the wealthy, again drawing that line at $250,000, and not just tax rates, but also all sorts of tax loopholes, corporate tax loopholes. He wants to transform the tax system so that it's fairer, he will argue, and he wants to strengthen Medicare and Medicaid. I think when you talk about strengthening Medicare and Medicaid and squeezing out inefficiencies, that's an expression that David Plouffe used this weekend. Well, you're not really talking about slashing Medicare and Medicaid. I think he really is. He may not use the metaphor again, but it's going to be a scalpel, not a machete, in dealing with Medicare and Medicaid. But they want to put it on a downward trajectory, but he's not going to do anything that's going to make kind of middle left or independent voters just explode with anger over Medicare, especially seniors. As Bob said, a lot of independent voters disappeared. Well, seniors kind of disappeared too, and he sure would love to get them back.
I think that's one thing for sure. He is going once again after the Bush tax cuts on the rich. He's going to try to get rid of those, and I tell you, the Republicans in the House will never go for that. I think even some Republicans are going to say there has to be some way to find new revenues. In other words, more taxes somewhere, somehow.
Republicans,
even some Republicans, they might not come on this broadcast and tell us that, but they would say that behind the scenes. But they are never going to go for removing the Bush tax cuts. I mean, that's what the last fight was all about.
I tell you, Bob is absolutely right. There is one, every area you can see room for compromise. There's one area where the lines in the sand are so firm, it's hard to imagine them moving. And it is those Bush tax cuts on upper income Americans that looks like it's the thing that could ultimately kill, at least for this year and probably next year because it's an election year, could kill this thing. Somebody would have to give in a big way to compromise on that.
So already it sounds like we're maybe starting at conflict and an impasse as we hear this vision. Chip, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I know you've got to get back and get ready to see what he does outline. And Bob, of course, thanks for joining us too. And thank you for watching Washington Unplugged. We'll be back shortly with those details or vision or proposals in the president's speech here at CBS News, and more later on our other broadcast. I'm Jan Crawford. Thanks very much.
If we don't expand our imagination,
Justification for being what you are.